Tandem HR.
I see my name in shining lights, yeah, a different city every night. Oh, I swear the world better prepare for when I'm a billionaire.
It's time to get down to business on the weekend's #1 business program. Known as the King of Networking, your host, Shalom Klein, has worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and created countless jobs. So, to success. Let's get down to business.
And indeed, we are all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship and business. We talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts from Get Down to Business on my website at shalomklein.com. And while you are there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. We've got a jam-packed lineup for you tonight. Great entrepreneurs, great business owners, great community impact makers. That's what the show is all about. As always, get on my website, shalomklein.com, where you can download the podcast from the show. And while you're there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. So my first guest up on the program is indeed a community influence maker. I'm thrilled to be joined here in studio by Paul Detlefs, who is a certified EOS implementer. But Paul, I learned something new about you today as I was doing some prep for the show. You had 3 ventures before you turned 16 years old, so an entrepreneur at heart for sure. First of all, welcome to Get Down to Business.
Thanks, great to be here.
So, Paul, that's probably the best intro, an entrepreneur at heart, but you also dedicate so much time to helping other business owners, both through your community involvement as well as through your business ventures. So, Paul, I'd love to get to know the person behind the microphone. Do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Shalom, thanks. I did start several businesses before I was 15. I had a paper route. I mowed lawns, and I sold sodas to construction workers. But it turned out that those weren't my ideas. They were actually my dad's ideas. I was more of an implementer. So I'm not I've been working in entrepreneurial areas my whole career, but I've discovered I'm not the idea person. I'm more the person to help them be executed better.
Well, it's important that people, realize where your strengths and where your, limitations are. And that is something that every business owner goes through, is you discover that, hey, you might have the best idea in the world, but you really suck at finance, for example. That's why you hire an accountant or you work with an accounting firm. But you help implement really is the key word over here. So I mentioned that 3-letter acronym, EOS, EOS implementer. So what is EOS for the uninformed?
Yeah, EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And an operating system is the basic ways you do things in your business, how you plan, how you execute, how you lead and manage people, how you run meetings. It's not the only one out there, but every business should have one. In fact, you have one. You may not know it, but your system that you have is perfectly designed to give you the results you're getting. If you want different results, you might consider changing your operating system.
So, Paul, you started working with EOS with the process in 2010, but you became a certified implementer in 2012. How did you discover EOS? I know you mentioned your business ventures and sort of your journey in discovering your strength, but what was it about the EOS system that made sense to you?
Yeah, well, after a long career in consulting, I left because I wanted to get back to working with small and mid-sized companies. I've done that pretty much my whole career. And I was doing business owner peer groups and coaching, and a colleague also doing that was told about it by another colleague. And he told me about it. I read the book Traction, which describes it. And I had read all the underlying books. It's based on things by Patrick Lencioni and Jim Collins and so on. And I read it in about 2 days, and one of the things I loved about it is I've always wanted to teach. And so in this role, I get to be a teacher of these tools and methods, as well as a facilitator of leadership teams and a coach to them. So that's my role.
So your company is called the Traction Group, and I love that word traction. I use it all the time, and that's really important. And you and your colleagues, you're focused on that implementation process, that traction that you ultimately help them succeed in achieving. So without naming any names, or you're welcome to if you have your client's permission, can you give us an example of a successful implementation, a successful story of traction for a business?
Yeah, I've got one in particular, a business owner who I met years ago when I was doing peer groups and coaching. And I talked to him back in 2010 or 11. He said, we'd really like to do some strategic planning. And so I said, well, I've got this new thing I'm doing. It's got some planning in it, but also some great execution. And he said, okay, so we got started. So I've been working with them actually for about 8 years now. And the main thing, they've grown and they've become more profitable, but the main thing he's gotten out of this is freedom. When I first started working with him prior to EOS, he was working 70-hour weeks. Then he dropped down a few years ago to 3 days a week, then 2 days a week, and now he spends about a half a day a week on the business. He's got somebody running it day to day for him. He's got grandkids. He used to love to travel. And so he spends a lot of time on family and community things, and he's basically gotten a lot of freedom from it.
Oh, work smarter, not harder. I love it. And Paul, you are, as I mentioned in your intro, you are involved in a lot of things in community. I know that is ultimately important to you, and that's your process for business success, is giving back to the community. You are a board member and a mentor at SBAC Empower. I know you and I share that in common in our passion for the work of the SBAC in general, but Empower, which is the 501c3. Can you tell us a little bit about, sort of what inspires you and the impact that you hope to have?
Yeah, just quickly, after I've always been a person of service. I'm a helper by nature, and was on the village board in Glenview for 12 years and very involved in the Boys and Girls Clubs. And as I wound down my involvement there, I thought, how can I use my business experience to help? And I thought, I really want to help entrepreneurship in the city, in the inner city, in some of the disadvantaged areas. So I got involved with Small Business Advocacy Council and SBAC Empower, which is our 501c3, which has a mission of empowering and enabling business owners and entrepreneurs in the inner city. And I think that's just a great way for me to use my business experience to try to help some of the communities in our area.
Absolutely. And in our show notes, I'll make sure to link to SBAC Empower so folks can learn about getting involved. And we spotlighted Empower a couple of weeks ago as we talked about the entrepreneurship program that we are working in partnership with Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart. So, Paul, you mentioned some of the things that you're involved in community. One of the things that you and I were corresponding about in advance of the show is healthy conflict, and that is something that it's interesting. Right now, communication is certainly very, very, very unique in this age of COVID. People aren't meeting as regularly in person. Tell me sort of how you're involved in that area and sort of your advice, perhaps the takeaways from today's show for somebody that might be tuning in, ways that they can perhaps improve their business communication and have healthy conflict and how it affects their business.
Yeah, these days it might be a little difficult to understand how conflict could be good with all that's going on, but the word healthy is very important. And this concept really comes from the author Patrick Lencioni and 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and his many other books, that most organizations have too little conflict. They need more conflict, but it needs to be healthy conflict. And that just means being open and honest with each other, being direct. But you don't have to be emotional. You don't have to be mean, but be direct, be clear, be open and honest. And the key, though, is you've got to have trust first. It's based on a foundation of trust.
That's great advice. So, Paul, we're quickly running out of time, and I want to make sure our listeners know where they can reach you, so they can get in touch with the Traction Group, learn a little bit more about EOS, and perhaps schedule a consultation. What's the best way for folks to reach you?
Yeah, our domain is thetractiongroup.com, and my email address is paul@thetractiongroup.com. Very simple.
Very, very easy, thetractiongroup.com, and SBAC Empower, sbacempower.org. Check that out. And, Paul, it's fascinating, and the approach that you have, and I know it really works with businesses and organizations of all sizes. It's not something only for the for the very successful organization. Success is always an interesting definition, but it's not only when you have 100 people working for you. It can work for small businesses, smaller organizations, and really any organization of any size. So, Paul, you mentioned travel, and in our closing moments over here, back in the days, as you said, when travel was possible, any particular memories that come to mind?
Travel memories?
Travel memories.
Well, my two favorite places in the world are Hawaii and Switzerland. I remember, I was just talking this weekend with some friends about walking down a valley in the spring in Switzerland and with the flowers and the bubbling brook. And someday I'd like to get back there.
Well, hopefully with one of the silver linings of COVID will be that remote work will be more possible than ever. So hopefully you will be able to get out. So, Paul, one more time, can you share your email address and website with our listeners?
Yeah, again, www.thetractiongroup.com, and I'm Paul at thetractiongroup.com.
Well, Paul, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for all that you do in the community. And we will be back with D'Angelo Bradley talking about community impact. Chicago, don't touch that dial. You're listening to Get Down to Business, and we'll be back after this quick break.
Sean Hannity is having trouble